Buju and Dinawe Maganadog. Awanukwe, Minawa, Nigan Kamaguk, Minawa, Jingos, Indigo, Ojibwe Mong, Getchio Nigamin and Dunjaba. Let me start that one over again. Gitchio Nigamin and Dunjaba, Minawa, Eleuthera Island, Bahamas, and Dunjaba, Adik Nun Dudame, Ogamambanes, Nin Nemoshe. Hello, all my relatives. My English name is Ivy Vineo. My pronouns are she, her. I am the daughter of a Grand Portage Ojibwe tribal member and a Bahamian immigrant. I live in Duluth, and I am the culture program coordinator for the American Indian Community Housing Organization, who is sponsoring and hosting this session tonight. A little bit about ACO. ACO is an Indigenous-led, Indigenous-focused nonprofit in downtown Onigaminsin, Duluth, Minnesota. And it was established in 1993. We provide many things to the community: housing, domestic violence shelter, family and culture programming, vibrant cultural arts programming, Indigenous-centered retail space, Indigenous food sovereignty initiatives, Indigenous health programming, and so much more. All of our work is anchored in our mission to honor the resiliency of Indigenous people by strengthening communities and centering Indigenous values into all aspects of our work. Our philosophy is that every American Indian deserves to live in a nonviolent and non-threatening environment and has the right to be treated with dignity and respect. So miigwech for joining us tonight for this special occasion with Dr. Michael Migizi Sullivan. While I go over the Zoom rules for this session, I would love to see where you're zooming in from. So if you could put that in the chat, and you get points if you can put what tribal lands you're zooming in from. From the registration list, it looks like there was like 65 people that registered, and they registered from all over Turtle Island. There's from people from the East Coast, from the West Coast, the South, and even the Midwest, of course, and then also well up into Canada. And so a lot of interest in this book and with Michael Sullivan. And so the Zoom rules is we're going to keep yourself muted, and we turned off your video screens for the presentation. You'll be able to ask your questions in the chat. I will moderate that, and then we'll have time at the end of Michael's presentation to go over those questions. And then Becky Norstaban is our Zoom tech. And so if you have any technical difficulties, send her a private message. Becky, her last name is Norstebon. Send her a private message and she'll assist you. We are recording this session, so it will be up on our ACO YouTube channel after this presentation tonight. And just a little bit about Dr. Michael Sullivan. Dr. Michael Migizi Sullivan is a Lac Courte Oreilles Ojibwe tribal member who lives and works on his reservation near Hayward in northern Wisconsin. He is a husband and proud father to 4 children who are already really great Anishinaabe language speakers and culture bearers, even in their young ages. Mike is a founding member of the Pipestone Drum Group. He is currently the faculty director of Native Studies at the Lac Courte Oreilles Ojibwe Community College. And he is one of the best powwow MCs, and he's learned from the best. and he's an amazing storyteller. And now we can add book author to his list of life accomplishments. I met Mike at UW Superior. I worked there before my job at ACO. And he did his undergrad studies there. And even then was he's very studious, and he was in the McNair Scholars Program, and everything he did evolved around the language, Ojibwe language. And it's so great to see where he is today with his doctorate and what he's done with the language. And so we're really excited to have him here with us tonight to share about his new book, Plums or Nuts, Ojibwe Stories of Anishinaabe Humor, co-written by his mentor, cultural and spiritual advisor, and lifelong friend, Amik Smallwood-iban, and how this new book has come to life, and how healing and humor are intertwined in Ojibwe culture. Amik was a friend, mentor, and advisor and teacher to countless people across Turtle Island. He was and still is larger than life. When he was in this earthly realm with us, and our memories of him keep him close to us. Chi Miigwech to Minnesota Department of Human Services Behavioral Health Division for providing funding to ACO via our Wasaya Traditional Healing Grant, for allowing us to host community sessions like this one that involve cultural and spiritual health education and opportunities for Indigenous community members to connect and reconnect with their heritage, culture, and traditions. And after all of that talking, I'm going to turn it over to Mike. So Miigwech for joining us, and Miigwech, Mike.
Oh, Miigwech, Ivy. Kwazo man. Wendam gagweja meguyan oma to be jayan to be dajindaman o mazanayagan bijina ga pimuki seg migowi na o kiwenzi ban ga nado dang kinagego amaga kima mazanayaganing migowin ga ujabiyang metago di bakate biyaman kinagego ga winda mawida o kiwenzi ban miko ga mo ban Nindash Migizi Indigenous me Gakana Miguyan ma Anishinaabe wa King. Ewe dash Ordainang Michael Indigenous Kanigu. Migizi Indude Minwash Omash Koniganing Udawza Gaganing Meomawe in Jabayan Meomaga Taji Natawigi Guyan Gay Meomawe in Jabado Nemama Nashkedash Namagichu Tagosgi and ene Miguyan to be Gagidoyan Bungi, the Dajindaman o Mazanagan Minoa, o Kea Asia Bapi the young, Anishinaabemowin young, get Yamino Kagonan, Bapi young, Mio Asia, Anin Gak Asia, Bapai Guyang Ma, Gegu, Mayanadak, Betakushkamang. So good evening, everybody. Man, I want to thank Ivy for the glowing introduction. I known Ivy a long time, and Ivy and Arnie and all the good work they do ever since, as Ivy said, I was a young, foolish boy at UW Superior, spinning my wheels, trying to learn Ojibwe. And thinking back, it seemed like it was just, a year or two ago, but that's quite a while ago now. And I'm glad to see so many people tune in, and have interest about the book and interest about the journey of how the book came to be. And as Ivy mentioned, the power of our healing as people, and the humor as one of the remedies for everything we've been through. We've been through the ringer with regard to colonization and assimilation, language and culture loss. And it's such a miracle that we have been able to maintain what we've been able to maintain in light of in spite of all the pressure to abandon our way of life. And if you knew Larry Smallwood, if you knew Amik, that's kind of what kind of guy he was. He was kind of a radical Anishinaabe and really believed in our way of life and really believed in our own standards as a people, our standards as to what was funny, our standards as to what was helpful in all of our hard times. We've been through so much, we've had to endure so much, and humor and laughing is so much a part of our coping mechanism. So if you hang around Anishinaabe people long enough, you're going to realize that we laugh, and we laugh about things that may be considered inappropriate to laugh at in mainstream standards. And that's why Mick was such a fun elder to know, because he'd make jokes about anything, and he didn't care, what the mainstream might think of him. When cancel culture came about, I used to think about Mick because I emceed powwows with him all the time, and we went around and told stories together in the winter time, and just spent a lot of time speaking to the public. And Mick left us, in 2017, and it was kind of right on the cusp of cancel culture starting. And I often wonder if he was even cancelable, just by his personality. And those of you guys that knew him understand that. And I think a lot of people, the great thing about the book is that a lot of people that didn't know him, get to meet him in that way. And so the book itself, Plums or Nuts is the title of the book, and it's a really, really awkward title for a Ojibwe book, a bilingual book. And people ask all the time, why do you call it Plums or Nuts? And that was a Mick's choice. That's what a Mick wanted to call it. And the book is his book, of course. He told me the stories. The book is a compilation of stories I recorded him telling, just short little short stories about his life and growing up, and the times that he spent here. And it's all kinds of silly stories in the book. But he'd tell me the stories over the course of our visits, and I'd type them up. And when he asked me one time, we were going through some drafts of the book, some of the stories in there, and I was checking my translations and making sure I had everything right. And he asked me one time, he said, what are we going to call this thing, Migiz? And I was like, Asia Bapi the Young, Anishinaabe Young, Bapi the Win, Anishinaabe, Bapi the Win. So I was coming up with these different titles, like Anishinaabe humor, Anishinaabe laughter, Anishinaabe funniness, how we laugh at each other. He just made this face and looked at me like that was the stupidest name he could ever heard, stupidest idea ever. So I kind of asked him, I said, well, what do you want to call it? And he said, what about Plums or Nuts? And he had that naughty smile that he had whenever he was being naughty. And if you knew him, Mick, he was naughty. He's one of our naughty elders. And that's why he was so fun. That's why he had so many students. He probably taught Ojibwe to more people ever in the world. He taught over a 40-year span, teaching language from elementary kids to full-grown immersion adults, and everything in between. He taught in more communities than anybody I know as well. He taught at Mille Lacs, LCO, St. Croix, Lac de Flambeau, Leech Lake, Red Lake, Minneapolis, Duluth. He was a really, really widespread geographic area that he worked in, and had a hand in crafting a lot of the skills that Anishinaabe language teachers have today. Mick was one of the very first ones to teach our language in schools when it first started in the 70s. That's how recent language teaching, our language in the school systems, is as recent as the 1970s is when it started. And he was one of the first ones. So he had a reach like nobody else. And he was also a real famous powwow MC. So he'd go all over in the summer months, and, even random powwows in the winter and spring, and, be the voice on the microphone. So if you've ever had the pleasure of coming here to LCO for our big On the Earth powwow in July, I think Mick probably emceed that powwow about 30 years in a row. So he was a constant presence on the microphone. And he was the one who kind of threw me in the deep end when it came to emceeing powwows. I grew up singing at powwows at the drum, and Mick kind of handpicked me to start emceeing with him to kind of show me the ropes and teach me how to MC. So if he hadn't taught language in a particular community, he likely served as a master of ceremonies for a powwow in that community. So he was a real recognizable figure and had a lasting impact in our area. So the book came about, Mick and I had been friends for a long time. He worked here in LCO when I was a young guy, a little boy. He worked at our school, and he was kind of a advisor, consultant sort of role to our language teaching staff in the community here. And he worked real close with our elders, and he made lots of little books and worksheets. And, he had a competence and an awareness of our language and structure and how things work. So he was a perfect elder and resource for a nerd like myself. So my background, as Ivy mentioned, I did my undergrad stuff in sociology at UWS, and then I went to University of Minnesota down in the Twin Cities, and that's where I did my graduate work and in linguistics. So I'm one of those guys, real nerdy language geek. And so the combination of my nerdiness and a mix awareness of how our language worked, really made us a deadly combination. We could really crank out a lot of stuff in a short amount of time. So, but I knew him, since I was young, and he was real good to me, even before I got good with Ojibwe. He was real supportive to me in the powwow arena, as a singer, and he'd pull me aside and he'd show me songs, and he'd make me record them on my recorder back in the day and put songs on there for me, old songs that he knew, old songs that he heard, songs that he wanted to be carried on in the powwow circle. So I was always real eager to hang out with him. He always had funny, naughty stuff to share with me, and he'd give me cigarettes, even when I was about 16, 17, smoking cigarettes with him, and he'd teach me a song or whatever. But we got to be good buddies that way. And when I started getting serious about my language learning, I'd go to him and I'd give him tobacco, I'd give him cigarettes, and I'd ask him for words that we would want to put into songs, round dance songs or powwow songs or whatever. We'd go to Amik for lyrics, and he'd always give us like funny stuff, funny stuff to make songs about. And that's just kind of how he rolled. He wanted us to get the humor. And when I started getting serious about my own language learning and my language use, I wanted to be an everyday user of Ojibwe, not just a individual who could get up and give a speech. I wanted more than that. I wanted to be able to use it in my house. I wanted to be able to use it with my kids and talk about everything. And I wanted to get the jokes. I wanted to know what the heck was so funny, because every time Ojibwe people come together, they're laughing. And when you don't understand, you feel left out. And if we all have like baggage that we carry through this language shift that we've been sort of forced into as a people, and we all kind of come to the table with our own trauma and our own stuff, our own grief that we deal with. And when we come to our language as learners, it's pretty humbling, pretty humbling journey. And we really got to deal with some of that stuff that we bring to the table. And a lot of times, some of our grief and our trauma really prevents us from getting anywhere in our language growth. We're really insecure, and we don't want to say anything wrong, or we don't want to get hollered at by the elders for saying anything wrong. And Mick was like a godsend for those of us who were at this level of language learning when he got involved. For a long time, I think he taught the same sort of context, the same way, to the same sort of group of students, the same sort of type of students, that he wasn't too hopeful regarding the future of our language until probably about 10 years before he passed out. He started to see some of the progress that language students had been making in different spaces, and he started to hang out in different spaces. And most people familiar with Ojibwe language revitalization have heard about the OOG effort, Ojibwe Motadida, up at Fond du Lac, through the Fond du Lac Tribal Community College and their whole organization there. But it's an adult immersion academy where they provide immersion immersion opportunities for adult language learners. And Mick got reeled into that circle, and he started hanging out with lots of younger folks and being in those spaces where people were trying to use language. And he always had the answers to the questions, that we had as young learners, because he was, considering the age of our elders, he was one of the younger ones. And he had lived in a time, in a place, in a way where he was a real modern elder. So you could pop the hood on your car and Mick could tell you everything about the engine and how to, change your oil and whatever else, Ojibwe, right? He had all the words for that. He could fix boats and reupholster campers and all that stuff. Ojibwe, we used to cruise around the city, Minneapolis, and he'd talk about the traffic, or he'd talk about the buildings, or he'd talk about the different people and the different cultures that you'd see cruising around the city. And he had like this incredible vocabulary for modern things that I really couldn't get in a lot of other places from a lot of other elders who didn't grow up the same way, who didn't live the same kind of lifestyle that he did. And he was a real valuable resource in that regard. And he always had a humorous twist on everything. So back to the book, and Plums Are Nuts as the title. So he says, what about Plums Are Nuts? And I was like, man, that's got to be borderline inappropriate, because the title of the book, Plums Are Nuts, is the title of the last story in the book. And if you got the book and you read the book, how funny, or how maybe inappropriate that is to laugh at, why he wanted to call the book Plums Are Nuts. But to him, that was funny as heck. And nothing was off limits for a good joke. And I knew Mick a long time, and when I finally got serious about language learning and recording him, I had him set up to be on Ojibwe People's Dictionary, our online dictionary. And I'm going to do a little bit of show and tell here in a minute of the dictionary and how you can find it and hear a Mick's voice on there. But I got him reeled in as part of the project. I got him hired to. I was a graduate student working on the project with Dr. John Nichols. He's our Dumbledore down in these parts. He's the head wizard. And John brought me on as a research assistant when I started grad school. And my job was to go out and record elders, find elders, record the heck out of them, and bring it back for the dictionary. And I really, really prioritized getting a Mick on there, because he spoke just like us, as far as we got lots of different varieties of Ojibwe, lots of what people might consider dialects, or and Mick spoke that classic kind of Southwestern Ojibwe that you see in the books. That's kind of exactly how he spoke. And he was such a valuable resource like that. And he pronounced everything, the way you would expect it to be pronounced. And I think it was because of his awareness as a language teacher that, he was kind of Mr. Enunciate was one of his nicknames from another one of his elders from Ojibwa, called him Mr. Enunciate, because he was always correct in the way he said things. And but he was such a significant contribution to the dictionary. And when I started recording him for the dictionary, we wanted to get stories. I want to get stories, man. He was kind of hesitant at first, because I think he didn't have the confidence in me. I didn't think that he believed that I'd be able to understand him, or I'd be able to type up his words. I'd be able to do the grunt work behind it, right? Because he could tell stories till he was blue in the face. But if I didn't understand what he was talking about, or I couldn't follow along with his stories, we weren't going to get very far. So he tested me out the first time I go to record him telling stories, and that he tells a story of getting a flat tire. You Migizi Sullivan, and it's one of the stories in the book. And when he gets done telling the story, he's like, all right, now go type it up and bring it back if you want to do more, translate it. All right. And I was so excited just to have a recording of them, just to be on my way to getting stories from Amik, that I went right to the coffee shop and started cranking it out. And coffee shop shut down, and I drove the rest of the way home and finished the story before I went to bed. And next day I was at his office, my recorder, pesty as heck. He used to call me Moogwag. Moogwag was one of his pet names for me. And he had lots of pet names for us, those of us who were his language students. And his nicknames are insulting. Insulting in the most loving way. And I think that's one of the most important things that language learners got to keep in mind. When it comes to Anishinaabemowin, Ojibwe Immersion, we tease the heck out of each other, but we do it out of love. And Amik had this expression, Kenama wia zage ik, ich bin mi kinzomik. And it's like, if you know somebody loves you, if they tease you. And that was his way. He teased the heck out of everybody. So Moogwag was one of his nicknames for me. And Moogwag means dingleberry. And he told me, he says, Wah, Miyama, and that's so good tie on Miyama, and every time I turn around, there you are. Because what he would do is he'd tell me, I got to do a funeral over here in the cities, and I got to be up to Duluth and teach a class, and I got to run back down to Mille Lacs, and I got a meeting, and that's how busy he was, all his stuff and running around doing this. And if I was available, I'd show up. I'd show up to his classes. I'd show up to his help him out with funerals. I'd show up wherever he was. He he liked that, I'd bring him cigarettes and I'd get words from him and I'd get my questions answered. So he started calling me Moogwag, which was his loving term of endearment for me. Means dingleberry. Every time he turned around, there I was. So I'm not going to spoil the book for you as far as the title goes. Plums are nuts. You're going to have to get the book and read it yourself and see if you find it as funny as Amik did for the title of the book. But one last thing before I get into the show and tell, talking about Amik, Amik was a legendary kind of iconic figure for us. And he was real close to our ceremonial way of life, our big drum doings. Amik belonged to lots of drums, and he was a faithful attendee of most of them, and did his best to get there. And but he took that stuff pretty serious. The big drum stuff wasn't really a target for jokes, but just about everything else was. And one time I was thinking about words, and we got a lot of words in Ojibwe that start with Boppy, Boppinain Dogwood, Boppinain Aminduia, Boppinain Doguzi, and Boppinain Don, and Boppinujigi, all these words, right? And if you look them up in the dictionaries, they say a word like Boppinain Don. The definition they give in the dictionaries is to think it or have disrespectful thoughts about it. And so as a language learner, you think about that, it's like, it's funny or it's disrespectful or what the heck, So I started asking Amik questions, and we'd work on words. We'd work on words for like 6 hours in a row before we take a break. We just hash out words. What's this mean? What's that mean? How'd you say this? Cranking stuff out. I'd pick the words out of his story, get definitions for the glossary, just crank on words because we were doing the work for the dictionary. And so we get to all these boppy words, and I asked him, I said, Ani ain't man bumping in dogs it do ya? I seen him think, I said, what's your impression of the word, or how to, in Ojibwe we say, how do you hear it? What's it sound like to you, right? But I'm asking him for a definition. And he says, bumping in dogs it. Yeah, it's people think he's funny, or people think he's disrespectful. And I was like, whoa, there it is. The definition was right in the dictionary, So I kept prying, right? And Bapanenama, oh, yeah, I think he's funny. Or think he's disrespectful. So, all right, get to another word. Bapanain dagwad, hani nainit taman yo. Bapanain dagwad. He says, people think it's funny, or they think it's disrespectful. And then he stopped himself right in the middle of him. He says, I could see it hit him. And he's like, you know what, Niji? He says, funny and disrespectful. That's the same thing in Ojibwe. And if you know Amik, that summed up his whole personality right there. He was a classic, funny Anishinaabe, and he was one of those old men, that would talk about the crustiest things and the crustiest ways. But he was always the first one to remind me, man, you think I'm naughty, you got to go talk to those old ladies. And it was really the old ladies who would turn my ears red more than a Mick would. But I want to just first show you guys so the stories that occur in the book are all Mick telling them in Ojibwe, right? So the book is actually a bilingual book. So the Ojibwe will appear on the left-hand column and the English on the right-hand column, and I'll show you all what it looks like here in a second. But something to keep in mind if you're not an Ojibwe reader, and hopefully by getting the book you'll become an Ojibwe reader. But if you're buying the book to read the English side, just keep in mind that it wasn't written for an English read. And why I say that is because translation is tricky, right? And languages don't always match. And so anytime you're dealing with Ojibwe translation, one thing you always got to keep in mind is our words mean more. So the Ojibwe side, there's way more meaning in the Ojibwe side, and the words mean more. What appears in the English column is just a sort of convenient translation. It's not necessarily the most brilliant translation. And the reason for that is because Amik wanted the English to match how he talked English too. So if I came up with sophisticated, more what I might consider a more brilliant translation for his Ojibwe, if it wasn't how he talked English, he didn't want to use it, right? He wanted the English to sound like how he talked English. So a lot of times the English is really straightforward, not so artsy of a translation. And people who are bilingual, people who work with languages and language translation, they understand that, right? But monolingual people, if your only language is English, then it's kind of hard to understand. You think speaking another language is just a matter of translating all the time. That's really not how it works. So I don't want to bore you with any more of my nerdy details, but the stories that appear in the book are all transcribed recordings, transcriptions of recordings that I made of Amik telling these stories. So they're all shoot from the hip recordings, and they've been through a process of editing. So we typed them up, fixed up his false starts, or maybe he changed words around, stuff like that. So it doesn't entirely match the recordings 100%. But I want to show everybody where you can listen to the recording. So the coolest thing about the book is you have access to hearing Amik tell these stories. So if you go to the Ojibwe People's Dictionary, which is our online dictionary housed by the University of Minnesota, and basically this is John Nichols' collection of words that he's done over the course of his career, all compiled in the dictionary. So really, really handy resource. It's frequent on the web usage of language learners. So most language learners have this on lock. It's always open on their desktop and their phone, and use it all the time. But anyway, I thought it would be appropriate and cool if the dictionary were to house the audio for the book. So I met with Nora. Nora's the current editor of the Ojibwe People's Dictionary now that John's retired. John's still working on it. John's still behind the scenes cranking away on adding words and everything else. But Nora's the new official editor. And so I went to go see Nora, and I brought her the audio. I brought her all the recordings, and she put them up on the website with a nice little write-up and links and stuff to get the book. So all I got to do is go to the
Ojibwe.
and click play.
Minnesota, Maryland.
Now, if you knew Mick and you heard his voice before, he had a real classic voice, and he was a really awesome storyteller. So he changes his voice when he acts out different characters, and really does a nice job at telling the story. So that's a added bonus to get in the book is you can go listen to him while you read along and get your accent down, if you want to talk like a Mick. But all 25 stories are there, and they occur in order as they appear in the book. So most times, when you go to a book reading, I've been to a couple book readings over the course of my life, and usually there's somebody, the author, standing up there reading out of a book. And when we were planning this book tour, if you will, with the press, I had the idea that, man, instead of having me read a mixed stories out of the book, I got the audio and I can play it. And I got a big Bluetooth party box I bring around and play his voice when I go to the in-person events. So when we planned this one with Ivy, I said, yeah, I can do all the show and tell that I normally do in person, play the audio and show the screen with the stories on them, and show people how they can read along. So this is one of the stories, number 11, and as it says here, when the old man stepped in crap. So how we did it is, of course, he tells the story in Ojibwe, right? That's the most meaningful side of it. And we translate it over here on the right-hand side. So I'm going to zoom in and make it bigger so you guys don't have to have your greasy noses right up to the screen. But that's kind of how the layout of the book is. And just give you a quick little tour of the book. 25 stories, bilingual. They're all really short stories, kind of all humorous in nature. There's something funny about all of them. I wrote the preface for the book, so I introduced the stories, talk a little bit about Amik and his life and our friendship and how the book came to be. And then they provided this cool map here that lists all the places, so you can tell Amik was from Ojibwe, which is number 1 here on the map, and that's what we call Lake Lena, Minnesota, just across the border, coming from Wisconsin over into Minnesota. That's where he was kind of born and raised and brought up. Now, Ojibwe or Lake Lena is a district of the Mille Lacs Band, right? So the Mille Lacs Band is kind of where the Ojibwe folks are tribally enrolled. So Mick had all kinds of relatives all in this sort of region and spent a lot of time back and forth throughout his life. So Minneapolis down here, LCO over here, and then all the Ojibwe names, those places that he talks about in the stories are listed here. So that's a cool little feature of the book. At the end of the book's a glossary, so I can show you that towards the end of the talk. But that's where you can look up words, individual words. Like if you didn't know what this word meant, right, you can go look it up in the dictionary if you can't figure it out exactly what it means from the English. So the glossary is a cool resource. Most language learners like glossaries, like lists, word lists, and so that's cool little bonus for you. And then at the end of the book as well is a section called the textual notes. And in the textual notes is where we note all of the differences that occur in the book that are different from the audio. So there's some stories where he edited it, he changed what he wanted to say, or he said the wrong word and wanted to replace it with the correct word. So if you're listening to the story and you're like, hey, that's not what he said, look at the textual notes and then you can see where he edited that. So, all right, I just got to get to my story I wanted to share here. So this one's Gashujukonga Kiwenzi, and I'll play the audio. Let me make sure you guys can hear the audio here.
Is it again? Go.
Somebody give me a thumbs up or something if you can hear the audio out there. I'm pressing play right now.
Yeah, we can hear it. Can you show the
Is it
both
again?
the
Go.
Ojibwe and the English?
Anishinaabeg.
words?
Yeah,
I know you get 2 to 1 now.
can't zoom in any farther.
We tawan. Skill and day one. You have ma. Got 2 to 1 now. We tan. Make what you saying. Come a shig goon gear, yasin. Mina show Quincy Bangashi Kirta, ya, hey, kiddo. Opportunity means you, ma. This my guy shot my bangi, ma, was. God the Nashka to sud. Show na be dasamo say a kiji tad. You want the bungan. Cause she's knowing about she's going to swimming or she to is the gate. I should know, just again, dad, and know. Pika. Cause we bag mad now, eat time with the best sugar can do and Gus, what is on? Gus, babe. Wow, be that some session of crazy. No, eat time. We're going to end up. Kita wa man again now and the much makanoa. The much mikonoa. Hande, ma kea bangi na was shan with the kea Mr. Kea na bien. And mo said okay, me beka, no je to cooking ma bangi. Mi ga ma nuch ma na ben ma. Mi ma give in the mo da oni boned ma give me seat. Me show crazy but can I go pasha that go carding and move. Can I go to Mokissan got to move when Nick? Me pick up pass carpet on the day, but yeah, you should come and give me the and right, I want you to do it out, you.
Wow. All right, so that was Ganja Jukong okay, Wednesday. All right, I'm gonna find another one for you. Some of the stories are longer than others, so this one's bog on, waving them on in the bog, and so pushing my bed around is what it's called, and it's number 14 in dictionary or in the book. Here it goes.
Get down game and I've been in Wakai and ma. She got mas, because she went up a cookag. Met to go. Jibaku, Gamek Mina. I'll be Gamek Mina. No, ma. Get Hamagad, Ninabe Gamek. How in Dash? Squandam ge Yamaga soon one the bear Gamegung. So we just chugged in the bargain to get take. Gotcha. I should watch again, you look. Remember so young. No, it's a mamma basic and then they need got a tabaring. No, you quick the quiz and second square young number the book. Bomb is young, bombing the quang. Ah, yeah, I know, chicken sheep is on, okay? He got a good walk in the pizza biz. Get a woman the man, a pizza biz at all, the one who got a good walk. Choke it out, here was on, Mishma naidama Chosh kamug. Hey, yeah, and then I taco cinnamon, ma. Jamakwig, ma, na may ma, the quaking, ma. Jamakwig, and you look. I took a chipapi one, your square name, a double jiggy, ma. Hard chain look, ma. Jamakwian, Gaigago, Ganja dog, Daban, ma. He pizza was on. Cause you have much to say on. We all went on and gone to down in the bargain. doing a bit tuske gonna was a cog on. Girls got poppy jig my squang. With a squang care. Keep him out the swear, I didn't go. A quail keep up Mars and my panin. Me gonna go, ganji the man in the bargain, me go the name, but number the water. Sugar gonna go pure and bappy water, man. That's not gonna go squan name, yeah, I'm gonna send on.
Bargains waving a bond in a bargain. Pushing my bed around. Yeah, so lots of cool stories, funny stories. That was a mixed thing, you know. He said one time to me, he said, you know what your young guys got to get down? You know what your young guys are lacking? I said, what? He said, our humor, man. He said, whenever you guys talk to me in our language, you sound like you're praying to me. And it got me thinking, you know, and it made sense because the majority of the times that we had to talk Ojibwe when we were first learning was having to do talks, you know, having to do tobacco talks and having to speak for ceremonies. You get thrown into that role, you know, when you start picking up Ojibwe. And Amik, you know, he was like really stressing the humor. You know, he loved the fact that we were helping out with ceremonies and storytelling and all that, but he really wanted us to pick up the humor. And so every single story he ever told me, there was some humorous element to it. And I'll show you one more story and then you'll have to get the book. Nobody will get the book if I show the whole thing off. But Waadookodaading, this is a fun one. You know, big drum culture is a real big deal in this part of Ojibwe country, and especially around Mille Lacs. You know, Mille Lacs band was the first ones to get our money due day wagon from the Boanag, you know, from the Dakota. So that's kind of like the first Ojibwe place where those drums are hang out and spread, you know, through this part of the country through the different bands of Anishinaabe. And so this is one of the stories that takes place at a big drum dance, the ladies' dance in the evening time, and kind of give you a little clue into how kind of naughty Amik was in his early years. So this one's called Waadookodaading, and it's on story number 19.
Mersha Kugini me do Armani me do Gamagung. Mima Gujing, Zabi Yang. Hasangi Mina Quaven Gay. Why, you may get no idea, Quazen Smog up in the gate on the chicken Agosegay. Why, Snaggy do it all go, and the readership would talk in the end of. Oh, always on the Arma Pindig, Queenie meeting. Because you also both had man do it up on him, not dreaming a quayan. Because a mamma and end man, a puppy water man, or boy honest. Do it up on him. You want the shoes or I'm a good gay. Oh, gonna put you go with our mamma, Michigan, I'm just 20 or boy honest man. Puppy water man. Papa, a man, my witching. But skiing a man, though, and Arjuanga. Bobby, I'm no. The Machiga, the Queen, I come on me, we sang, we sang gay. So you get Majo even the gay, no, Queen of Gamuad. Get a name of the meal, Quazes, I should be in the gay on my David Gamu. Kill me and I go, Quazes, when the Jake and I go, go me and I go. Oh boy, I'm walking. Yeah, I want to take a bug so much. I'll be really sure to it. I'm going to get kid like this. No, guys, squad, I'm coming now. Basic, me, keep me. I say, me, said, I'm going to do it. Got music in my basic wavik. I just sure talk. Me, I'm going to get kid like this. What, yeah, I'm going to have me go. My band and the mother did. Samay Chenonish Kabamidom in the way can't ungound in a money of Anish. We went to Saga among the one. Go to boys it. Me in a day go craziness.
So maybe one last thing I'll show you about the book. When you go to the end is the glossary. So just to show you what that looks like. Most people that got the bilingual books, they know, right? So every single word that occurs in the book, you can find in the glossary. So you can look it up based on its root word or whatever. You can find here in the glossary. And this is a useful resource for people extracting vocabulary, language teachers and language students, like to up their game as far as their vocab goes. So lots of cool words that occur in this book that aren't in any other dictionaries yet. Amik was kind of a innovative Anishinaabe in that he had words, he had ways to call just about everything. It was hard to stump Amik. And one thing I told people is he was the first elder I ever met who had words for hickeys and tattoos. And and if you know him, make you understand why he had those words. That's just kind of how he was. And that first day I went to record him to get stories from him, I had a hickey on my neck. And he said, "Hi, yeah, hi, kena migu bejigwa be wishiwangi ena miguyan." And I could understand Ojibwe pretty good at the time, but I couldn't understand the last part of what he said. He said, "Hey, oh, man, everybody knows you're not a bachelor." And then the last word he said, I didn't know. And I said, what'd you say, man? What was that last part? Said, everybody knows you're not a bachelor because that big freaking hickey on your neck. I said, hickey? I said, you got a word for hickey? He says, yeah. Megu, megu, enem, kido yan. What? You got a word for tattoo? Wasn't a juggy be a gun. It wasn't a juggy be a gauze. It wasn't a juggy be a gauze gainin. Wasn't a juggy be a gazo. It wasn't a juggy be one. So he had all these words: tattoo, you have a tattoo, I have a tattoo, I give him a tattoo. Holy man, where the heck have you been? I had stumped so many people. I wanted to know how to say all that kind of stuff. And Amik was, like I said earlier, was a real godsend to our generation when it came to modern language, modern stuff that we feel the need to know how to say. And at the same time, he was a real old school stickler. He gave me a lecture one time about, he had 5 colors for thousands of years, and we got by just fine with 5 colors, man. Miskwa, got Wabishka, Ojawashkwa can be blue or green. You could say Ozawa, that could be yellow or brown. Makadewa, that's black. We got by just fine for thousands of years with those 5 words, and till all you young ones come along and need a word for pink and purple and silver, so he'd be a stickler about, the old sort of way of seeing the world too. But he had all this modern vocabulary that was pretty critical for the time of language revitalization. We got kids in our community here that speak our language, and teenagers that speak our language, and even people into their young 20s that speak their language because of our immersion school. And so if we don't have ways to talk about stuff that they're into, then hey, they're going to use English. So Mick was a big helper in getting us words. One time, all the kids, I used to work at Waadookodaading, and all the kids are so into video games, and that's all they talk about. They'd be talking Ojibwe, and then they'd switch to English to talk about their video games and gaming out and how they called everything. So I got a hold of Amik, and I was like, man, I need some words for playing video games. And the first thing he said was, yeah, we never had that. And that's a pretty common response. You go to an elder and ask him words for a video game. We never had that. And once he had a chance of thinking about it, he says, Minayo is Yichagewad, we Mushkoin in Tawad. And I was like, Mushkoin in Jita, there it is. So Mushkoin in Jita, type it in the chat. Mushkoin in Jita wasn't a Mick word. It literally means he or she like exercises their hands. Like we had one of those little squeezers, those little things people use to work their hands out. That's Mushkoin in Jita, do an exercise to make your hands strong. But in our Ojibwe universe, we extend the meaning to mean play video games because it's kind of a jokey, funny, humorous way to say play video games. Oh, they're exercising their hands. Me to go beandig dajita down Anishinaabe nungu mashkawan and jitad. That's how we talk about the kids, you know. Me to go gojing, you know, in panay payam, and we were always outside. It seems like every generation's like that. We were always outside. Kids these days are always indoors, but he was the go-to elder for stuff like that. You know, he realized that we had a need and did his best to help us fill those needs. So going in Jita, he or she plays video games or exercises their hands. So you know, back to Ivy's point about the humor, you know, wanted me to touch on humor and healing. And one thing that, you know, elders like Amik do for us, for our learners, and one thing that language learning does for our people is it kind of reconnects us, you know, it reconnects us to a different way of seeing the world and the way that our people saw the world for years. And it's a journey, you know, and like I said earlier, we bring to the table all of our grief and all of our baggage and everything we've been through, and we're terrible to each other. You know, that's one of the things we got to get past is being so nasty to one another. And through our experience, you know, through our collecting of all this grief and all the trauma and everything we carry from generation to generation, they say it's in our DNA now. You know, it's in our DNA now. The resilience piece, you know, about how we can still be here, how in 2023 we even have a language anymore, you know. And one of the coping mechanisms for our people is our humor and our laughter. And when you hang around Ojibwe elders, you kind of learn that we don't take ourselves as serious as we do in the sort of colonial world. And when you think about the characteristics, right, of a Chamokaman or the colonizer. And when I say Chamokaman, you know, I don't mean that as a exclusive term to all Caucasian people. When we say Chamokaman broadly, we're talking about the American, right? The American, the colonizer, essentially. In the, you know, in Canada, there's the Shaganash and our relatives in the West, it's the Wasichu, and you're not sort of labeling the whole race or trying to put anybody down, but the colonizer, the man, you know, the one responsible for half the grief that we've been put through. And you know, it's not putting guilt or shame on anybody or who they are, where they come from, but that's kind of how we talk in the language, right? It's the Chamokaman broadly, not singling anybody out or being any particular way, but that's the word we have at our disposal. So, but when you think about that, we take ourselves serious, right? And we're not supposed to laugh at certain things if we're following that Western stream, more Chamokaman way of being, way of thinking, way of interacting with each other. We have a real hard time laughing at ourselves in that world. We have a really even harder time having other people laugh at us in that world. And we take ourselves extra serious. We're super uptight and we're super serious. If we were to trip and fall outside, we'd get up and we'd be real insecure about anybody seeing us, right? We don't want anybody to see us fall. And in our Anishinaabe universe, it's almost opposite of that. Christ, we're supposed to laugh at each other. We're supposed to laugh at ourselves, especially. And if we fall, if we're all right, you know, that's a good laugh too. And that's okay. But it's almost like this polar opposite universe that language learners got to juggle, you know. And one of the key sort of indicators for language growth among language learners is that they learn how to use humor, right? They learn how to be funny and they learn how to get the jokes. And a lot of times the jokes are jokes on ourselves. A lot of times we're sort of trained and conditioned by our elders to speak lowly of ourselves. Gawin mami kwazo siya na Anishinaabe. Gimami kwazo mana and dash gidinaway maganin on. So we got this teaching that we're never supposed to brag about ourselves, right? We never ever brag about ourselves. But we're supposed to brag about our relatives. We're supposed to brag about other people, and that's highly valued, you know, that we brag about our relatives, but not ourselves. And that's really conflicting sort of ideology, you know, when a educated, distinguished person in the Western world is the one who does all the blabbing and uses all the fancy words, whereas our sort of distinguished speakers in Anishinaabe country are the funny ones that can make themselves out to be lowly and pitiful. And that's kind of how you get something from people, is you make them think you're more pitiful than you really are. And we're super pitiful, you know, that's the opposite worldview. So one thing about learning our language is it connects us to that worldview. And it's like upside down from what the English worldview projects for us. So one example of that is our belief in creation and how we're the most lowly creatures here. We're the most pitiful creatures here. And from a Western standpoint, you'd say no. You know, we dominate over the beast, right? And that's even in the Bible. I think somebody told me, like that's kind of like the perspective is that human beings were here to dominate over the wildlife. And from our perspective as Anishinaabe, is we rely on everything in creation that was put here before us, and none of that relies on us. So we are this most pitiful, humble being that the Creator put here. We're worse than the mosquitoes and the ants and the tiniest things. We're even more pitiful than them. And that's opposite of the colonial sort of worldview. And so when you learn your language, when you learn to speak your language, all of that's built in, right? And people always come up with, well, we need a word for this, that, and they don't realize it's all built in to the words we have, the language that we speak. And you know, all these buzzwords and historical trauma and trauma informed and care, and you know, all the stuff that people are chatting about in the mainstream. Yeah, super important, super helpful. But what they often neglect is we have a lot of our own cultural avenues for nurturing our spirit, right? You chogging on the one that we all carry inside us, the one that makes us us. You know, that's all built into our culture on how we nurture that spirit and how we take care of it. And it's getting away from our culture that results in the trauma and the dysfunction that you see plaguing our communities. You know, all the addiction stuff, you know, the substance abuse stuff, and ripping apart our families, man, and sending our young ones home way before their time. And what our elders teach us is the same thing they've been saying for generations: is you got to keep our kids close to our way. You got to keep our kids doing what we do, and not only keep our kids doing it, but you got to do it yourself, right? Because kids can see through the authenticity or the lack thereof. And if we're not practicing what we preach, and our kids see that. And it doesn't mean what we want it to mean. So if we rely on the schools to do the work, we rely on the state to do the work, and ain't gonna get anywhere. Because what we feel, what we believe, and what we prioritize isn't a priority of the state or sometimes even our own tribal leadership. So you know, when it comes to humor, that's the real key coping. And when you take yourself a little less serious, it's not so hard. You know, life isn't so hard. Managing your grief, getting through your grief isn't so hard. And you know, that ability to laugh. And we got all these coping mechanisms for healing, and you know, ceremonial approaches and spiritual approaches, and some of them are so just as simple as going out in the woods and letting it rip, right? Letting it all out, and getting that good cry out. We're not supposed to suppress that, you know, we're not supposed to hold that back and let it go. But if we go out in the woods and we do it, then there's money doog, you're gonna doggoog, you know, they're gonna hear you, and they're gonna take pity on you. And little by little, you know, that grief becomes a little lighter, a little easier to carry. You know, we're always missing our relatives, and we're always going through something. But when we dwell on it and we don't nurture it, in the right way, in the healthy way, and that's when we turn to these other things that are destructive to our people. And our elders say if we don't nurture ourselves and we don't do that self-care and deal with our own grief and everything we've been through as individuals, and it comes out sideways and it affects all those ones around us, the ones we love the most, the ones that we don't want to hurt. And so those are all that's the whole key to the language, right? Like languages unlock so much of the good life and the well-being, the sort of holistic well-being is often encoded in our language. And some of us, we haven't made that step to our journey of language learning, or some of us have, or some of us are dabbling, or some of us are all in, or whatever. But we got to be inclusive of all of our relatives and our efforts, and appreciate everybody's effort and everybody's contribution, because it's our language, it's our language, and nobody gonna give it back to us. We gotta go get it if we want it. And the book, Plums Are Nuts, is a pretty valuable resource in that it's that lighthearted storytelling. It's not serious stuff, right? It's not there's serious stuff in the book, but that's not the focus. And the focus is what the funny stuff was that happened during all that serious stuff. And that's what Amik really wanted to focus on, and leave his mark, with the humor. And it was really exciting to watch him get excited about it, because one story turned into 3 stories the next time, 5 stories the next time. And next thing you know, we had all these pages of stories, and started getting enough to compile in a book. And it was super cool to see how excited he was for all of his students to get the stories, because he had so many students. Like, he had 20-year-olds who were learning Ojibwe from him, whose grandmas were in his Ojibwe class in Minneapolis in the 70s. Like, that was the reach of his career. And he knew everybody out there. And he was so excited for people to get the book. And we had every intention of getting the book out while he was live, and he checked out on us, real unexpectedly, and was gone. I was with him one day and gone the next. And that took time to get back into it and get the book ready for publication after he passed away. So that's why it's coming out now instead of years ago when it should have came out. But I'm glad I got it out. It's a bucket list item for me, was to get that book out to the people. And remember Mick, he left his mark, among his students, among his people. And so many students of Mick's have gone on to fill so many of the voids that he left. He conducted funerals and naming ceremonies, and full first kill feasts, and language classes, and language tables, and all these sort of advisory roles that he played for schools and community organizations. And he was just really a Swiss Army knife when it came to Anishinaabe language and culture. He could do it all. And so many of his students have stepped up. I'm so proud of that. So proud of his students for filling the void that he left. Nobody could replace him. Of course, his cowboy boots were way too big for any of us to fill. But so proud of what he left. So many people could get so discouraged after losing somebody like him, and he just kind of re-energized us and kept us on track, eye on the prize. And we got a language to save here. We're all young enough. Everybody on this call is probably young enough to witness our language disappear if we don't do something about it, right? So that falls on every one of us, not our tribal governments, not our own teachers at school. It falls on us as individuals. It's individual responsibility that we have to sort of guarantee our existence, our survival as a people. So I'm getting serious now, and I'm not supposed to get serious because it's supposed to be funny and fun. And I want to open it up for questions, because I know some people have questions, some people pre-submitted questions. There's Dr. Arnie. Need you to see you, man.
Arnie.
And then you guys cut me off when I get serious, Ivy.
No, oh my gosh. Thank Apachigo Miigwech for everything that you shared about the book, about Amik. I you Zoom is such a funny thing that, you know, we have everybody muted and their screens, you can't see what people are laughing or, you know, laughing along with the stories, but Arnie and I were laughing about your commentary on the stories, and so sorry that we didn't have it open for you to witness us enjoying all of that, but we were, and I'm sure everybody on this call was. And so I just I went to your book event at the Fond du Lac Tribal Community College, and that was the first time I had heard Amik's voice since the last time I had seen him. And so it was really touching, and I'm just so happy and proud that you were a part of this from the beginning with him. And you can just see the pride when you talk about it and when you talk about Amik, and it's so good to see, and it feels so good. And so you really meant a lot to him, and it shows. And so I want to open it up for questions to everybody on the call. It could be anything about the book. It could be anything about Anishinaabemowin.
Fish
Yeah.
fry recipes.
Say again?
Fish fry recipes.
Yes, fry bread recipes. Oh my goodness. So here's your chance. No question is off limits with Chi Migiz.
Yeah, if
Well,
you ever want to know how to keep a room full of Shinaabs quiet, just ask them if they have any questions.
I guess. I do want to mention, since we're waiting for people to ask their questions in the chat, the American Indian Community Housing Organization, we do have a online Ojibwe language table, and it's weekly. We do 8-week sessions, and the instructor is Ricky Defoe from Fond du Lac Ojibwe tribal elder, and very respected in our communities. And he has been teaching this for years. It was in person at ACO before the pandemic, and then the pandemic hit, and we were like, we got to move this online. And so we did, and it's still online. And we have his assistant on here, Danae Sinclair. And so Buju Danae, and just wanted to say Chi Miigwech to Ricky and Danae for, oh wow, we had 82 folks come on Monday. Isn't that amazing? For that first class of the 8-week session. So yeah, so I just wanted to let you know that that is a resource for you, and you can be anywhere in the world and still join that. And Danae could help you with that too, or you could just email me back when I email you the link to the recording here, and I can connect you to Ricky and Danae. And so
It's awesome.
I have a question, Mike. A really respected elder that Arnie and I won't name him, but and he's passed on now, but years and years ago, he said, I don't know if he said it in front of Arnie, but he said it in front of me, and he said, if you don't speak our language, are you really Anishinaabe? And so I want to throw that out to you to see what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I know it's a tough one, man. When we were little kids, they used to tell us we grew up at a time when Indian education was a new thing, right? Like LCO Ojibwe school was a new thing in 1975, 1976, so right before my generation was born, they started these tribal schools, and elders were there, right? Like Hall of Fame elders, man, working in these schools, first language speakers. Just wow, it just blows my mind, some of the people that were around us when we were kids. And the that was the message we always got. If you guys don't do nothing about it, there won't be an Anishinaabe in the future. When you're a little kid, you're like, what are you talking about? And that pressure, that's an incredible amount of pressure to deal with, and then I say that a lot when I do academic talks, motivational talks for language learners and stuff. And it seems like every generation, inherits a fight, right? And the fight that wasn't completed or finished by the last generation, and go back a generation, my mom and them's generation, it was the big treaty rights recognition, right? And upholding the right to harvest in our area. And then the language stuff started, right? And then our generation comes along and we inherit this sort of language fight, or this language effort, to maintain our language. And so my generation, we felt that pressure, like so many of us felt that pressure. So many of us are about my age and grew up in similar sort of contexts, similar messaging. Nowadays, it's really hard to deny, like I tell people that I am not the judge, nor am I the scorekeeper. And I get a lot of questions when it comes to culture, right? Authenticity and spiritual stuff. And I always remind people that, like I'm not the judge. And once we start judging and once we start keeping score of who's doing what and this and that, and we ain't even really Anishinaabe in the first place, you know what I mean? So I think there's always this effort to one up each other on how Anishinaabe we are, right? Whether that's through blood quantum or our language ability or ceremonial participation or our harvesting, right? Are you Anishinaabe if you don't eat rice? Are you Anishinaabe if you don't know how to make rice? And then, like all of that is just really damaging, I think, to our effort. And one thing that we heard growing up too is if you're Anishinaabe, you're Anishinaabe. And there's no such thing as you're part Anishinaabe. You're Anishinaabe, and it's a way of life, and there's no escaping it. And one thing about Amik, especially, was he was like, we have to value and uphold what's uniquely ours. And if it was something that was imposed on us, he wasn't really interested. He didn't care. He didn't pay much mind to it. But if it was uniquely ours, like, man, we better pay attention. You better learn this stuff. And that's what the elders in this area similarly, are similarly minded. But you're born in Anishinaabe. You know what I mean? You're born in Anishinaabe, and people will come to me with questions like, I was baptized as a kid, but I want a Anishinaabe name. Like somehow they're not eligible for a Anishinaabe name because, and Amik would say, why, some Chamokaman poured holy water on you? No, you can't have a name. Like that was his sort of approach, right? And he said, you were Anishinaabe before the Chamokaman made you a Christian. And it's like, that's harsh language for people who are, have their own fragility kind of thing, but my perspective, I'm not old enough to be critical like Mick was. He was pretty critical dude, but he had gained that right to do that, right, through his age and through his experience, where I'm not nearly close to being considered old yet. So I don't have the authority to talk like that, or do I, want to be considered anybody who could make a call like that. Like you're born in Anishinaabe, whether you're going to be Ojibwe, whether you're going to speak Ojibwe, that's up to you. That's up to you. And I really appreciate the plug you put out there for the language table you do. Like all that free and accessible everywhere stuff is awesome, man. And we're really trying to get into that frame of mind for the whole movement, so anybody can get involved at any stage, at any level. And Rosetta Stone, another huge valuable resource that's just made so much of an impact everywhere and ongoing, right? Like Rosetta Stone's not just a one-time deal, it's multiple levels coming out. And Preston, he's one of the actors in there, and we got to bring him over to Mille Lacs for filming every year, you know, because they're building all these levels, so they're still recording them, still cranking them out. So putting all the plugs, because we're really running out of excuses, you know, is what I tell my students. It's like all this is accessibility, you know, like my classes I teach here at our university are zoomed out. My students are all over. One of my students is on the call, Kubade, she's from LCO, but she zooms in from Pennsylvania. She's one of our elders that lives in Pennsylvania, and she's in class every day, you know. And so I run out of excuses, you know. My students will say, well, you know, I got to take my kid to a dentist appointment. And I said, oh yeah, so they don't have Wi-Fi there, or you don't have a phone signal at the dentist, like you can zoom into class, you know. So I get zoomers from the Burger King drive-through and everywhere else in between, you know, because it's accessible now, and that's a good thing. And Rosetta Stone costs a little bit of money, you know what I mean? I think $25 if you're enrolled in a tribe, of any tribe. You don't even have to be a Ojibwe. And then it's like what, $75, $100 for non-enrollees. So that's a huge resource. You know, most Rosetta Stone apps, if you want to get Rosetta Stone Spanish or Rosetta Stone Mandarin or something, you're going to pay more than what you would for a Ojibwe Rosetta Stone. So I tell people too, like that's what, 20 minutes a day on your phone. You can have it right on your phone in your pocket. So running out of excuses again, you know, everybody's got 20 minutes to scroll through their Facebook or their Tinder or their farmersonly.com or whatever they're into, you know. But you could sacrifice 20 minutes on your Ojibwe Rosetta Stone app. So we're running out of excuses why we can't. And you know, some people will use the term, I'll use the excuse, I'm too old to learn language. And man, I got some elders who kill it in my classes, you know, really, really good, among the top of the class for language learners. So don't set yourself up with all those excuses. You know, we create our own barriers as language learners, especially as minority indigenous language learners. We create our own barriers and we put up our own blocks. We put it in our head that it's too hard. It's the easiest freaking language in the world. Like, quit telling yourself it's so hard. You're doing that to yourself. And language learners do that all the time. And it's about your frame of mind when you come into it. You got to be positive minded. You know, you got to believe in yourself that you can do it. Otherwise, you ain't gonna be able to do it. You know, so that's a big part of how I teach in my classes, and creating that sort of safe space to try it out. You know, we're all gonna say everything wrong 100 times before we ever say it right, and that's okay, because you can say it wrong here, and we ain't gonna laugh at you, and we ain't gonna make you feel bad about it. But maybe after that 100th time of saying it wrong, you'll hear, oh yeah, that's not how you say it, and you'll say it right. But we got to deal with all that baggage, you know, that we come to the table with, and all of our learners. You get your, you know, gung-ho language learners that seem to pick it up, drop that right away, you know, and then you get these ones you gotta explain it to 2, 3, 4, 55 times, you know. And it's all good, you know. It's all, everybody's welcome, right? And that's how it should be. It'll be inclusive of our effort. I even get Chamokes that say, you know, what about me? I'm not enrolled, I'm not even native. And you know, it's like, well, it's too late for me to be picky. You know, I'm ready to teach anybody who's willing to learn. I'm not going to be picky as for one of my students who got access same way. But, you know, there's limitations, of course.
Yeah. So speaking of Rosetta Stone, someone asked about the Ojibwe Pimsleur audiobook.
Oh, there's the old ones. I think they're making new ones. Huh? Does anybody hear anything about the new ones? I thought I saw something on Wagush and Nathan Amid were recording some new ones, maybe. But yeah, the Pimsleurs are, you know, I'm a linguist, so I can be extra critical of certain things that maybe I shouldn't be. So the Pimsleurs is good, useful resource, but it's limited. You know, it's a sort of dialogue approach, memorization approach. I use them, like I would listen to them when I was on my gung-ho language learning kick with the headphones on all the time, walking around UWS. So I had one of those iPods, yeah, one of my iPods with, you know, a whole bunch of language stuff on there. Pimsleur tapes were one of the recordings I would listen to, and so yeah, I listened to it. I used it. What I had always hoped for when I was a user of it was that the prompter dude would start giving your prompts in Ojibwe. So I would get sick of, like, you'd get this little Ojibwe dialogue, Anindiwe Jabayan, Odenang and doing Jaba. Like, I loved all that, right? Like all the little back and forth with the voices. But then you get this non-speaker dude chime in and say, do you remember how to say hello? And after a while, I got tired of hearing his voice. Like, how come he can't talk Ojibwe? How come he can't ask us if we remember? Like, how are we supposed to pick up more natural stuff if we're always prompted in English? So I had even back then, I had my complaints. But all resources are good. I shouldn't say that. All resources are potentially good, right? And when you're a beginner, you don't really need to be too scared or worried about how good your resources are. Like, latch on and pick up what you can wherever you can from whoever you can. Kind of, we're at that stage right now where anybody's willing. There was this one guy, you guys remember Basil Johnston? So he was a Migizi from Cape Croker, Ontario, and he made some phenomenal language stuff, man, like recordings, but he spoke this super Eastern variety, right? Like really, really Eastern sound in Ojibwe. So like where we'd say, Gavin, he'd say, Gavin, like that. And he had his CDs he'd put out, and I get all the CDs and put them on my iPod and listen to it all the time. And I showed it to one of my uncles here, and he's like, holy right, Mike, if you could understand that guy, we must be easy. It's because he understood how much faster Basil talked. And but it was a resource that wasn't from my community, wasn't from my dialect area, but it's too damn late to be picky, man. There's some awesome lessons on those recordings, and I was all ears. So I encourage everybody, the better you get with language, and the better of an eye you'll get, better of an ear you'll get for what's a good resource and what's not. But in the meantime, don't let any of that insecurity or worry prevent you or discourage you.
All right. Thank you for that advice. I don't see any other questions. And we are at 7:30. So Danae, don't you have a question, Danae? You must. Putting you on the spot. Gaween?
Oh, there you go. I was trying to unmute myself, but I guess that wasn't allowed at the beginning. Hold on, I can probably think of something. I can't turn my camera on, it's not allowed though. So I'll just be a mysterious woman. Bojogegin chimix. Ninbindige gijugo koyende go ajo naning in donji Manitoba a king ejinika de goma wini begong in digida. So yeah, I'm really happy to be here. I love the community at ICO and the language table. And so I guess I always, one of the big questions that we get asked all the time at language table is for your own journey of learning. I know you mentioned at the beginning that it went many, many years, and I say I'm on the 45-year plan right now, and I'm only on year 3. So I got a ways to go too. But I guess I'm wondering what you tell learners when they're starting their journey and they're trying to figure out what they should be doing to spend their time. I guess what kind of recommendations do you have for them?
Cool. Yeah. Classes help, of course, if you can take classes from somebody who can kind of break stuff down for you. But if you have access to actual speakers of our language, people that use our language regularly, that's precious, and that's probably limited time frame you're dealing with, because those folks are elderly pretty much everywhere, right? So in order to learn any language, you got to hear it. So you can't just learn a language with the pen and the paper and the websites and the grammar charts and all that. You got to have access to the spoken language. You can create your own access, right? You can get the recordings. That's what I had to do. Our elders were checking out early, and I wanted to hear it around the clock 24/7. So I got all those recordings and started trying to rewire myself with listening to Ojibwe all the time. Even before I could understand most of what I was listening to, I was still listening to it because I wanted my ears to get acquainted with it. Because language is a two-way thing. Eh? It's you can know how to say. Just imagine that, right? If you were to learn everything you would ever want to say from reading and writing, from grammar, book learned, right? Well, I heard about book learned learners. So if you learned all of that from the book sort of style approach, but never had it here, you would never be able to understand people actually talking real Ojibwe to you. You know, you'd have your little charts out and you'd be able to look up words, but it's really got to be that communicative thing for it to happen real, you know, and happen fast too. There's expedited routes to learning our language. You can do it a lot faster than it's been done before. Nowadays, especially with all of our immersion efforts, you know, at the schools and the camps and stuff. So making your ears there where the language is spoken, whether that's in the schools, whether that's in the camps, whether that's on your recordings or whatever. And then, you know, the actual elder time is more valuable than anything. Me, I was one of those really nutcases that carry around a little notebook all the time. And when I was real early in my learning, I'd write down words I wanted to learn how to say. It's random thoughts, right? Like tying my shoes. Damn, I don't know how to say that. Write it down. Next time I get around one of my elders, well, hey, how do I talk about tying my shoes? Fill in all my blanks. And on the back of my little notebooks, I'd write down these Ojibwe words that I heard, either old men talking or giving speeches or on my recordings. And what the heck was that? Write it down real quick. Then I get around elders. Hey, what's this mean? And they tell me, you know, and I fill in my little. So you have to be proactive. And I tell my language students this who take my classes, if you're only thinking about Ojibwe, if you're only worrying about Ojibwe when you come to class, and then when class is over, you close your book, you go back to your normal shuffle, it's going to take you 20 plus years to get my jokes. It's going to take you 20 plus years to even tell one of your own. You know what I mean? You got to be thinking about it all the time. Like you're cruising around, you're scrolling through Facebook. How would you say that, right? TikTok, whatever. Like always having that inquiry, that desire to know. And you start with the most immediate stuff, right? So if you don't know how to say, I took a shower and brushed my teeth, then what you worrying about talking a 4 or 5 minute tobacco prayer, right? Learn how to talk about taking a shower and brush your teeth before you worry about standing up there with tobacco and talking for everybody else. You know, sometimes we jump into the wrong lane right off the bat where we want to be the one doing the talk rather than the one who can say, I brushed my teeth this morning. So yeah, all kinds of nerdy advice. I did a couple talks. There's probably a recording on YouTube somewhere where I had to do a strategies for language learners or some kind of thing. Yeah, maybe if I can dig it up, I'll share it with Ivy and the group naked, because I had a whole list of stuff people can do, resources, websites, books, really helpful language books. Yeah.
Yeah, that would be great. If you could share some of that with me, and then I could send it out. I don't know how easily accessible it is for you, but I could send it out in the next couple days, if that works for you, Mike.
Cool.
Yeah. So we are over time in the colonial sense. So we'll just take this last one from Sky. I'm a beginner Ojibwe learner, but I'm also a screenwriter who's very interested in Ojibwe language preservation. I'm working on a story lightly inspired by Nana Boozhoo, and I want to add an authentic Ojibwe dialogue from fluent native speakers. Can you recommend ways to connect with more fluent native speakers of Ojibwe for this and for learning the language as well? Miigwech.
Yeah, there's you know, I don't know where you're from, Sky, or where you're at physically, but there's lots of zoomable stuff right there. I know different people. Ivy's got the one she talked about from ACO, and Gui was teaching, and then there's ones in Minneapolis, you know, that are zoomed out. And I think if it the Facebook groups, you know, where you can kind of network and meet people. Elders, you know, like our elders, you're gonna have to, like, I could recommend people, give you names, but whether or not they'd even be interested or even available, you know, that'd be a totally different thing. So part of our work with our elders and in our communities is establishing rapport, right? So you got to establish rapport. You just can't come in and say, hey, I want to do a movie and give me the words for it. People are going to look like, what? Get out of here, right? So we have this huge tradition of gift giving, and we make offerings. So if I was even to introduce you to one of my elders, you'd have to bring them a appropriate offering to even have their time, even to get that introduction, because that's how treasured they are and how valuable their time is. So I wouldn't just turn any random person loose on our elders without that. But you can establish rapport and meet people if you network and you put in that work to get in there. I don't know if you're Anishinaabe or what community you're from or how close you are to reservation communities or whatever, but some particular reservation communities, tribal communities have higher numbers of elders. In some places there's hardly any elders left, and when I say hardly any elders, hardly any first language speaking elders. Some reses don't have any. So depending on where you are, who you are, all that would kind of determine where you go and who you could ask. But yeah, keep that in mind, that you don't want to come in out of left field if you do have the opportunity to meet with elders and work with them. And the ones who are really, really suited for this kind of work are extremely busy and in high demand and are well compensated for their time, because they're really, really experts. So keep all that in mind,
All right. We're gonna end this session, and I just want to thank everybody that joined us tonight, and Chi Miigwech to Dr. Chi Migiz, as his Zoom name is, and for all that you gave to us, and that all that you continue and will continue to give to us, and your whole family. I'm just so amazed by your kids and your family, and so proud. Yeah, and so I do want to let you know that I will be sending out a email tonight with the link to everybody that registered, and you'll have that as a resource to go back on. And then also ACO's going to be having Mike and one of his kids come in person February 10th, I think it is, for winter storytelling. And I swear that the last time you did that in person, he's done it with Preston the last couple of years on Zoom, but before the pandemic, he came into a full space. All the chairs were taken. There were people sitting in the against the wall. It was so full because people are so hungry to hear these stories and hear the language and be connected. And that literally is one of our favorite events that has happened at ACO. And just really looking forward to you coming back and sharing with us again. And so we will be putting that out probably in January on our ACO Facebook page and on our website. So keep a lookout for that. And then this book session, Zoom session, was the first in a series of 6 Indigenous Writers series that we're going to be hosting. ACO is going to be hosting. And so the flyer is out on our ACO Facebook page. And so, and on our website. So please go to that. And our next session is with Thomas Peacock and Betsy Albert Peacock. And they're going to be here in person at ACO on December 16th. And then we'll have 4 more in the new year. And so throughout the new year. So just wanted to let you all know about that, and just keep in contact with our Facebook page, and you can email me anytime And just want to say miigwech again, and I guess we'll check out here, huh? Mike?
Miigwech. Yep, right on. Miigwech, Ivy, everybody for tuning in.
All right.
Aptigo miigwech.
Aho, Egi, Niji, Miigwech.
Okay. Love to your family from all of us.
Oh.
Okay. Miigwech.